Look, nobody at the Galactic Combat Institute expected much from the human. Why would they? Cordum Prime housed the most prestigious military training facility in known space, where elite warriors from hundreds of species came to hone their skills, master impossible techniques, and generally become the kind of nightmare that made pirates reconsider their career choices. You had Cordun warriors with natural bone plating thick enough to stop plasma rounds, Thundran shock troops who could secrete acid strong enough to melt through starship hulls, Muldaran psychics who could read your attack patterns before you even thought them through. And then there was Lieutenant Jenna, human, standing at the processing terminal in her standard-issue training gear, looking like someone's lost pet compared to the absolute units surrounding her. The Cordun administrator processing her credentials had to adjust his optical sensors downward twice just to find her face. His name was Brackmoth, 8 limbs of pure muscle wrapped in natural armor plating that had deflected more weapons than most species had even invented. He'd been teaching combat at the Institute for 32 cycles, and in that time, he'd trained approximately 6,000 elite soldiers from across the galaxy. He looked at Jenna the way you might look at a particularly optimistic insect. "Human," he rumbled, his translator chip rendering his native clicking into flat galactic standard. "You understand that the mortality rate for first cycle students hovers around 12%? "I do," Jenna said pleasantly. "And you are aware that your species has exactly 0 natural defenses, no armor plating, no venom sacs, no psychic abilities, no environmental adaptation beyond basic temperature regulation? Yep. No enhanced bone structure, no regenerative capabilities, no redundant organ systems? Nope." Brackmoth's 3 eyes studied her with something between pity and confusion. The Galactic Council had mandated this cultural exchange program, allowing one human to train at the Institute as a goodwill gesture. He'd argued against it in every faculty meeting. Humans were new to the galactic community, barely 3 generations since first contact. Their homeworld was some backwater planet, in an unfashionable arm of the galaxy. They had no business here, but the Council had insisted, and now here she stood, all 1.68 meters of her, probably about to become a cautionary tale. "Very well," he sighed, processing her credentials. "Orientation begins in the main arena. Try not to die immediately. It reflects poorly on the Institute." The main arena was, in a word, massive. In several other words, it was an engineering marvel that could simulate combat conditions from 600 different planetary environments, contained enough weapons to supply a small war, and had seating for approximately 20,000 spectators. Currently, it held about 300 incoming students, representing 80 different species. Jenna found a spot near the back, trying not to draw attention. This lasted approximately 30 seconds before a Thundran the size of a small tank noticed her and began laughing. A wet, bubbling sound that his translator rendered as genuine amusement. "Look! Look!" Krull bellowed, his acid-slick skin glistening under the arena lights. "They sent a human! I've seen their vids. They break bones from simple falls. Their skin tears if you look at it wrong." Several other students turned to stare. A Fokun named Brektor, whose partially phased form flickered in and out of visible reality, drifted closer. "I heard their planet has only 1 G of gravity," Brektor said, his voice echoing slightly from subspace. "They must find our standard 1.2 G crushing. And they need to consume matter multiple times per day, or they start cannibalizing their own muscle tissue," added Hicks Leek, a Muldaran whose psychic sensitivity made her cranial ridges glow faintly. "How do they survive long campaigns?" Jenna smiled politely and said nothing. She'd heard variations of this conversation approximately 800 times since leaving Earth. The galaxy had opinions about humanity, and most of them involved the words fragile, weak, and adorably optimistic. Let them think that. Wouldn't be the first time someone underestimated her species. Brackmoth entered the arena to scattered applause, his 8 limbs moving in that unsettling coordinated rhythm that made Khordun such effective close-quarters fighters. He ascended the central platform, and the arena's acoustic systems amplified his voice. "Welcome to the Galactic Combat Institute," he announced. "You represent the finest warriors your species have to offer. Over the next 4 cycles, you will be broken down, rebuilt, and forged into instruments of precise, controlled lethality. Most of you will fail. Some of you will die. Questions?" Nobody asked questions. Nobody ever asked questions at this point. You either believed you were good enough, or you withdrew before the actual training started. "Excellent," Brackmoth continued. "We begin with a demonstration. As is tradition, I will spar with a volunteer to establish baseline expectations." His 3 eyes swept the crowd, and Jenna knew, just knew, where this was going. "Our human exchange student," Brackmoth said, and his voice carried just enough challenge to make it clear this wasn't really a request. "Lieutenant Jenna, please join me in the ring." The crowd's reaction was immediate and loud. Laughter, mostly, mixed with some sympathetic clicking and a few genuine gasps of concern. The betting pools started immediately. Jenna could hear the whispered wagers. How many seconds would she last? Would she even land a hit? Would Brackmoth accidentally kill her? And how much paperwork would that generate? Jenna walked to the center platform, keeping her breathing steady and her face neutral. The ring itself was a standard combat circle, 30 meters across, with an energy barrier that would prevent lethal attacks from escaping into the crowd. Brackmoth waited, 4 of his limbs folded, the other 4 loosely ready. "Standard sparring protocols," he announced. "First blood, submission, or incapacitation. Lieutenant, you may decline. No shame in recognizing a mismatch." "I'm good," Jenna said. Brackmoth activated his plasma blade, a standard-issue combat weapon that could cut through starship hull plating if properly maintained. The blade hummed to life, a meter of contained plasma that shimmered in the arena lights. He held it in what Jenna recognized as a defensive stance, probably planning to demonstrate some basic techniques while not actually hurting her too badly. How thoughtful. "Begin," called the arena's automated referee system. Brackmoth moved at what he probably considered demonstration speed, still faster than most species could track. The plasma blade came around in a controlled arc, angled to pass close enough to be intimidating but not actually threatening. Jenna caught it with her bare hand. Not blocked. Not dodged. Caught. Her fingers wrapped around the plasma blade like she was grabbing a particularly aggressive stick, and the contained energy that should have instantly carbonized organic tissue just stopped. Dead silence filled the arena. Brackmoth's 3 eyes widened to approximately twice their normal diameter. His translator chip made a confused, stuttering sound, unable to process whatever he was trying to say. Jenna looked at the blade, then at Brackmoth, then back at the blade. She applied pressure, not much, just a light squeeze, and the plasma emitter assembly snapped with a sound like breaking glass. The blade flickered and died, leaving her holding a sparking piece of very expensive, very broken military hardware. "Huh," Jenna said mildly. "I think it malfunctioned." Brackmoth stared at his broken weapon, then at Jenna, then at his weapon again, as if expecting it to somehow explain what had just happened. His mandibles moved soundlessly, Perhaps, Jenna suggested, her voice carrying just enough helpful concern to border on insulting. We should try that again? At full power this time? Just to make sure it wasn't a defective blade? Somewhere in the crowd, someone dropped their data pad. It clattered against the floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the shocked silence. Brakmoth's natural armor plating began flushing darker, a Cordoon stress response. He dropped the broken blade, and it clattered against the platform. His communication implant activated, and Jenna heard him request a replacement weapon. Maximum grade. Full combat specification. Are you certain? The equipment officer began over the comm. Now! Brakmoth snapped. A maintenance drone delivered the new blade within seconds. This one was heavier, military spec, the kind of weapon you use to cut through fortified positions. Brakmoth activated it, and the plasma blade roared to life with noticeably more intensity than the first. The air around it shimmered with heat distortion. Full engagement, Brakmoth announced, and this time his voice carried no hint of restraint. Combat speed. Combat power. The crowd leaned forward collectively. Several students activated recording devices. This was either about to be the shortest combat demonstration in Institute history, or something very, very interesting was about to happen. Brakmoth attacked. Not demonstration speed, not training speed, full combat velocity. The kind of strike that had won him championships, the kind of movement that turned enemy soldiers into past tense. 8 limbs working in perfect coordination, the plasma blade coming around in an arc that would have bisected most species before they could process they were under attack. Jenna caught it again. One-handed this time. With her other hand, she checked her chronometer. I have orientation in 20 minutes, she said conversationally, as Brakmoth attempted to pull his weapon free and discovered that it absolutely would not budge from her grip. Can we speed this up? She squeezed. The plasma blade's emitter array, military grade, rated for continuous operation in hostile environments, supposedly indestructible, crumpled like aluminum foil. The containment field destabilized, and the weapon went into automatic safety shutdown, but not before a small explosion of sparks and plasma erupted from the handle. Brakmoth dropped the destroyed weapon and stumbled backward, all 8 limbs scrambling for purchase. Jenna dusted her hands off, examining her palms for damage. Not even a scorch mark. So, she said to the arena at large, where's the cafeteria? I skipped breakfast, and I'm starving. Nobody answered. They were all too busy trying to remember how to breathe. Pandemonium. That's really the only word for what happened next in the arena. 300 of the galaxy's finest warriors, beings who had conquered fear on a dozen battlefields, who had stared down death and laughed, all of them collectively losing their minds at once. Krull, the massive Thundran who'd been so amused earlier, had gone completely silent, his acid secretions slowing to a nervous trickle. Brektor had phased entirely into subspace and refused to come back out. Hixlik's psychic sensitivity had apparently overloaded from the sheer confusion radiating from every mind in the vicinity, and she was sitting on the floor making small, distressed noises. Brakmoth stood frozen on the platform, staring at his twice-destroyed weapons like they'd personally betrayed him. His armor plating had flushed through approximately 6 different stress colors in the past minute, finally settling on a mottled purple that his species reserved for complete cognitive dissonance. Impossible, he muttered. The emitter array is reinforced durasteel. The plasma. Containment field operates at 6,000 degrees. No organic tissue can... Yeah, about that, Jenna interrupted gently. Can someone please direct me to food? Because I wasn't joking about being hungry, and I get cranky when my blood sugar drops. A small maintenance drone, apparently the only entity still capable of functioning, projected a holographic map showing the cafeteria location. Jenna thanked it and started walking toward the arena exit. "Halt!" Brackmoth roared, recovering some of his composure. "You will explain this. This, whatever this was." Jenna paused, turned back. "What's to explain? You swung a blade, I caught it. Pretty straightforward." "Nothing about that was straightforward. No species can withstand direct plasma contact. Your medical files indicate baseline human tissue tolerance." "Oh, those," Jenna waved dismissively. "Yeah, our medical scans always confuse galactic physicians. They keep trying to compare us to species from normal planets." "Normal planets?" Brackmoth's translator chip sputtered. "What in the burning hells is an abnormal planet?" Before Jenna could answer, the arena's main entrance irised open, and a being of pure crystalline structure floated through. Director Pholux, the Institute's headmaster, moved with the kind of deliberate grace that suggested immense age and even more immense patience. Their body refracted light in complex patterns, creating small rainbows across the arena floor. "Instructor Brackmoth," Pholux said, their voice like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in my office, with significantly fewer witnesses." "Director, I must protest. That was not a suggestion." 10 minutes later, Jenna found herself in the director's office, which looked less like an office and more like the inside of a particularly aggressive geometry textbook. Pholux didn't sit. Couldn't really, given their crystalline structure, but hovered near what might generously be called a desk. Brackmoth stood nearby, all 8 limbs tense, looking like he wanted to demand answers but wasn't quite sure how to phrase the questions. "Lieutenant Jenna," Pholux began, and their voice had shifted to something more curious than authoritative. "I believe we are owed an explanation. The human medical profiles we received indicated your species as, how was it phrased, discouragingly fragile. That's because you ran our scans against species from garden worlds," Jenna said, settling into a chair that had been built for someone twice her size. "Let me guess. You compared human bone density to Muldaran standards, muscle fiber composition to Fokun tissue structures, thermal resistance to species that evolved on planets with breathable atmospheres and reasonable temperature ranges." Pholux's crystalline structure flickered, their equivalent of a blink. "Those are standard comparative baselines. They represent optimal evolutionary development across 600 surveyed species." "Optimal for them," Jenna said. "Most species in the Galactic Council evolved on what we'd call paradise worlds. Low gravity, usually around 0.6 G, stable climates, abundant resources, predictable seasonal patterns. Am I close?" Brackmoth's mandibles clicked irritably. "Obviously. Evolution favors species on habitable planets." "Right. Habitable, comfortable, safe." Jenna leaned forward. "Now let me tell you about Earth." She held up one hand, counting off fingers. 1.0 G gravity, which I know doesn't sound like much until you realize your people evolved in 0.6. That means human bones are almost twice as dense as Khordun bone, just to support our own weight. Our muscle fibers are packed at ratios that make no sense to your medical scanners, because we needed that density to move effectively in heavy gravity. Pholux's structure was now flickering rapidly, their version of intense concentration. "Temperature ranges," Jenna continued, "from -40 to +50 Celsius, depending on region and season. Atmospheric composition that includes enough oxygen to be mildly corrosive over time. Background radiation from our sun that would sterilize most species' reproductive cells. An extinction-level asteroid impact every 65 million cycles or so. supervolcanoes, ice ages, and that's just the environmental hazards. What else could there possibly be? Brackmoth asked weakly. Oh, the fauna, Jenna said cheerfully. See, Earth has this fun quirk where everything evolved to either kill everything else or avoid being killed. We've got predators that hunt in coordinated packs, ambush hunters with venom that causes paralysis and tissue necrosis, megafauna that could crush you accidentally, parasites, diseases, fungi that literally hijack neural systems. She paused for effect. And humans? We were prey. For millions of cycles, we were food. Then we figured out tools, and we became predators too. We became both, prey and predator. Do you understand how that shapes a species? The office was very quiet. Your reaction time, Folux said slowly. When Brackmoth attacked at combat speed, human neural response evolved to track predators moving at high velocity while simultaneously planning escape routes or counterattacks. Our visual processing speed is approximately 3 times faster than Cordoon standard, because we needed to see the thing trying to eat us before it actually ate us. Brackmoth made a strangled sound. The plasma blade. The heat, human tissue temperature regulation is insane compared to most species, Jenna explained. We can function in extreme heat or cold. We sweat, which I know sounds disgusting to most of you, to dump excess thermal energy. Our cellular structure adapted to absorb and dissipate heat because Earth's climate was unstable and unpredictable. That plasma blade? Uncomfortable, sure. Damaging? Not at my exposure time. This is not possible, Brackmoth insisted. No species evolves in such hostile conditions. They die out. Most do, Jenna agreed. Earth has had 5 major extinction events. Billions of species wiped out. And somehow, human ancestors survived every single one. Not because we were strong or fast or venomous, because we were adaptable, stubborn, creative. We used tools, formed communities, changed our behavior, and refused to quit. She stood up, pacing now, warming to her topic. You want to know the really fun part? Humans are persistence hunters. We chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. Our endurance capacity is off the charts compared to most species because we evolved to literally run animals to death. Your 12-hour training days? That's a light Tuesday for human military basic training. Folux's crystalline form had gone completely still. The Council needs to know about this. The Council already knows, Jenna said quietly. Why do you think they really sent me here? Brackmoth's 3 eyes widened. The cultural exchange program was never about culture, Jenna finished. It was an assessment. The Council wanted to know if the reports from First Contact were accurate. If humans were actually as dangerous as initial observations suggested, or if that was just luck and bravado. Folux's voice dropped to something almost reverent. And now we have our answer. Now you have part of your answer, Jenna corrected. Because here's the thing, Director. What I just did, catching a plasma blade and breaking it, that's not special ops training. That's not enhanced genetics or cybernetic modification. That's just standard human baseline capability. She let that sink in for a moment. I'm not even particularly exceptional by human standards. I'm just a lieutenant who scored well enough on aptitude tests to qualify for the exchange program. Back home, we've got billions of people with similar capabilities. And our actual elite forces? She smiled. Well, they're the ones who made me look slow during training. Brackmoth sat down heavily, his 8 limbs suddenly unable to support his weight. By the burning hells, he whispered. What kind of nightmare world creates a species like yours? The kind, Jenna said, that makes you earn survival every single day. Director Folux dismissed them both after extracting a promise from Jenna not to accidentally break anything else important. At least, not until they'd recalibrated the entire training program. Brackmoth left, looking like someone had just explained that his entire understanding of combat biology was fundamentally wrong, which, to be fair, was probably accurate. Jenna finally made it to the cafeteria. The whispers started the moment she entered. 300 students who'd witnessed the arena demonstration, and every single one of them suddenly found their meal trays fascinating when she looked in their direction. She grabbed food. The Institute's nutritional processors could accommodate most species' dietary requirements, and found an empty table. She made it through approximately 6 bites before Krull appeared, looming over her table like a mountain made of acid and poor decisions. "Human," he rumbled. "Thundran," Jenna replied pleasantly. "The tournament. Mid-cycle combat evaluation. 3 weeks." Krull's acid secretions increased slightly, his species equivalent of nervous excitement. "You will be there." It wasn't a question. "Wouldn't miss it," Jenna said. Krull nodded slowly, then lumbered away. Within minutes, half the cafeteria had approached her table with similar questions, challenges, or thinly veiled threats. Brektor wanted to know if she could catch things that weren't entirely in this dimension. Hixleek asked if human minds were really as chaotic as her initial scan had suggested, or if Jenna had somehow been blocking her. "Little of both, probably," Jenna admitted. "Human neural architecture is messy. Bilateral brain hemispheres, distributed processing, emotional centers tangled up with logical centers. We're basically running on legacy hardware that's been jury-rigged about 1,000,000 times." Hixleek's cranial ridges pulsed with distress. "That sounds horrifying." "Works, though." The next 3 weeks were, in a word, interesting. The Institute's training staff had to completely redesign their approach to Jenna's curriculum. Standard obstacle courses proved useless when she could simply muscle through barriers designed to stop species with natural armor plating. The endurance tests were a joke. Jenna finished the 40-kilometer weighted march in just under 3 hours and asked if there was a shower nearby, because she'd worked up a mild sweat. The zero-gravity combat simulation was particularly entertaining. Most species struggled with spatial orientation in microgravity because their homeworlds had gentle, consistent gravitational fields. Humans? Humans evolved with an inner ear system designed to handle unstable, shifting environments, walking upright on uneven terrain while tracking threats and opportunities simultaneously. Jenna moved through 0G like she'd been born in it, which drove the Fokun students absolutely insane. They were supposed to be the masters of 3-dimensional combat, and here was this gravity-bound human executing maneuvers that made their instructors take notes. Brackmoth watched these sessions with the expression of someone witnessing their entire worldview collapse in real time. He started requesting human biology texts from Earth databases, then human history files, then, and this concerned the Institute's librarians, human entertainment media. "I need to understand," he muttered to Folux during one staff meeting, "how a species this dangerous convinced the galaxy they were harmless." "By being friendly," Folux observed, "and by not correcting our assumptions." "That's terrifying." "Yes." The tournament arrived with significant fanfare. The Institute's mid-cycle combat evaluation was a major event, broadcast across multiple systems, with representatives from various militaries watching to scout talent. The format was simple: single elimination brackets, full contact combat, standard safety protocols, to prevent actual death, but not much else. Jenna drew Krull in the first round. The arena was packed, 20,000 spectators, most of whom had heard about the human who'd broken Brackmoth's weapons, but hadn't actually seen it themselves. The betting pools had evolved considerably. Now the question wasn't if Jenna would win, but how quickly and how badly she'd injure her opponent. Krull entered the ring to thunderous applause. He was a crowd favorite, massive, powerful, with acid capabilities that had ended his last 5 matches in under a minute. His skin glistened under the arena lights, already secreting combat-level concentrations of corrosive compounds. Jenna entered to dead silence, then a smattering of uncertain applause. She still looked absurdly small compared to most competitors, still moved with that casual human grace that other species found unsettling because it implied she wasn't even trying. "Standard rules," the referee system announced. "Submission, incapacitation, or arena exit. Begin." Krull charged immediately, acid trailing from his skin in droplets that hissed when they hit the platform. His strategy was obvious. Close distance, make contact, let his natural weapons do the work. Most species couldn't withstand Thundran acid. Their armor would dissolve, their skin would burn, and the match would end quickly. Jenna stood perfectly still, watching him come. At the last possible second, she sidestepped. Minimal movement, just enough to let Krull's momentum carry him past. She didn't even look winded. Krull spun, confused, charged again. Same result. "You going to fight?" he bellowed, "or just dance?" "Trying to decide if I should be sporting about this," Jenna called back. "Your acid. What's the pH?" "Strong enough to melt Durasteel." "So what? pH 2? 3? Jenna considered this. "Earth's oceans run about pH 8, but we've got volcanic regions that hit pH 1. Humans swim in both. Our skin pH balance is already around 5.5 because we evolved sweating acidic compounds for thermoregulation." She reached out casually and touched Krull's shoulder, her hand making direct contact with his acid-slick skin. Nothing happened. Well, nothing to Jenna. Krull, on the other hand, looked like someone had just explained that his primary defensive adaptation was actually pointless. "The thing about persistence hunting," Jenna continued, circling now, "is that it's not about being faster or stronger. It's about outlasting. Humans can regulate our core temperature through sweat. We can maintain pursuit for hours, sometimes days. How long can you maintain combat-level acid production, Krull?" Krull attacked again. More, desperately this time. Jenna didn't even dodge, just weathered the impact, absorbed the acid contact, and waited. 10 minutes later, Krull's acid production had slowed to a trickle. His movements were sluggish, his breathing labored. Jenna looked completely fresh. "I could keep going," she offered. "Or you could yield. Save your energy for matches against opponents who are actually vulnerable to your abilities." Krull stared at her for a long moment, then slowly raised one massive hand in submission. The crowd went absolutely wild. Second match was against Hixlick, the Muldaran psychic, who could supposedly predict movements by reading neural patterns. This was the matchup everyone wanted to see. Brute force versus mental prowess, physical capability versus psychic prediction. Hixlick entered the ring with confidence, her cranial ridges glowing bright with psychic energy. She'd watched Jenna's first match, studied her movements, and believed she understood the patterns. "Begin." Hixlick's psychic senses reached out, touching the surface of Jenna's thoughts, reading the neural patterns that would predict her next move. And immediately recoiled with a sound of pure distress. "What is wrong with your brain?" Hixlick gasped. "Oh, that," Jenna said sympathetically. "Yeah, Human neural architecture is kind of a mess. We've got this whole bilateral processing thing where different brain hemispheres handle different functions, but they're constantly communicating and sometimes contradicting each other. Plus, emotional centers right next to logical centers, memory systems scattered everywhere, and this weird recursive consciousness thing where we're aware that we're aware that we're aware. Stop, Hickslick pleaded, her cranial ridges flickering erratically. It's like trying to read a conversation between 12 people who are all talking simultaneously about different topics while also singing and doing mathematics. That's just thinking, Jenna said. We don't really notice it anymore. Hickslick tried to focus, pushing through the cognitive chaos to find predictive patterns. She caught fragments. Jenna was going to move left, no right. No, she was going to faint. And then, the thoughts branched into possibilities, each one spawning more possibilities, creating a decision tree so complex that following it gave Hickslick the psychic equivalent of a migraine. How do you function? Hickslick demanded. Practice. Also, we don't really have a choice. This is just how human brains work. Hickslick attempted to mount an actual attack, but predicting Jenna's movements proved impossible. Human thought patterns were too chaotic, too multi-layered, too full of contradictory impulses that somehow resolved into coherent action at the last microsecond. Hickslick would predict a block. Jenna would strike. Predict a strike. Jenna would dodge. Predict a dodge. Jenna would stand perfectly still. 15 minutes in, Hickslick submitted, nursing what? Was clearly a psychic headache of legendary proportions. Your species, she said weakly, should not be possible. We get that a lot. The third match was against Brektor, the Fokun phase shifter who could partially exist in subspace. This was the match the Institute staff were most curious about. How would physical capability handle an opponent who could literally become intangible? Brektor entered the ring already half-phased, his form flickering between dimensions. He was fast, he was elusive, and he'd never lost a tournament match, because you can't hit what you can't touch. Begin! Brektor attacked immediately, phasing in and out of reality, striking from impossible angles. His form would solidify just long enough to land a hit, then phase out before counterattack. It was beautiful, it was effective, and against most opponents, it was utterly unstoppable. Jenna watched, patient, studying his patterns. Because here's the thing about phase shifting. You have to solidify to strike. You have to exist in normal space, even for just a fraction of a second, to make physical contact. And humans? Humans had reaction times measured in milliseconds, honed by millions of cycles of avoiding predators and catching prey. Brektor phased in for a strike. Jenna moved, not to dodge, to intercept. Her hand caught his wrist in the exact microsecond he solidified, and her grip was absolute. Brektor tried to phase out, but Jenna's mass and momentum kept him anchored in normal space. Fun fact about persistence hunting, Jenna said conversationally, maintaining her grip as Brektor struggled. It requires incredible patience, waiting for exactly the right moment, tracking patterns, understanding behavior. She swept his legs, easy, given that he was still trying to phase and couldn't properly balance, and pinned him to the platform. I can wait here all day, she offered. How long can you maintain partial phase while being held in normal space? Brektor submitted 30 seconds later. The crowd had progressed beyond wild enthusiasm into something approaching religious awe. This human, this supposedly fragile species from a backwater world, had just dismantled 3 of the Institute's top students, using nothing but baseline human capability. Jenna returned to her preparation area to find Brackmoth waiting. "You've made your point," he said quietly. "Have I?" "The Council will want answers now. Real answers." "Good," Jenna said, "because the galaxy needs to understand something important." "What's that?" She smiled. "That we're just getting started." Director Folux summoned Jenna to their office exactly 12 minutes after her third consecutive victory. No request, no polite scheduling, just a direct comm ping with coordinates and the unspoken understanding that this wasn't optional. When Jenna arrived, Brackmoth was already there, along with 3 individuals she'd never seen before. 2 were clearly military. Their postures screamed command authority, even if their species didn't. The third was something else entirely, a being composed of what looked like living shadow that occasionally coalesced into vaguely humanoid shape. "Lieutenant Jenna," Folux began without preamble, "allow me to introduce General Bakhtar of the Council Defense Forces, Admiral Lakshman of the Expeditionary Fleet, and Observer HFY from the Intelligence Directorate." The shadow being rippled in what might have been a nod. "We've been watching your performance with great interest," General Bakhtar said. His species, Molkuran, if Jenna remembered correctly, had 6 arms and a reputation for tactical brilliance. "The Council would like some answers." "I've been pretty forthcoming so far," Jenna replied evenly. "You've explained your physical capabilities." Observer HFY's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You have not explained why your species hid them." "We didn't hide anything. You made assumptions based on incomplete data and comparison to species from comfortable worlds. Not our fault you didn't ask better questions." Admiral Lakshman leaned forward, her crystalline exoskeleton chiming softly. "The cultural exchange program was never really about cultural exchange, was it?" Jenna smiled. Was wondering when someone would say that out loud. "The Council received reports from First Contact," Folux said carefully. "Reports that suggested humans possessed unusual combat capabilities, strategic thinking that bordered on prescient, adaptability that defied standard behavioral models. But the initial medical scans read you as fragile. So we dismissed the combat observations as outliers or measurement errors." "Big mistake," Jenna said. "Clearly. So the Council proposed this exchange program. Send 1 human to the galaxy's premier combat institute. Observe their performance under controlled conditions. Determine if the species represents a potential asset or a potential threat." "And?" Jenna asked. "Which am I?" "That," Observer HFY said, "is what we're here to determine." General Bakhtar activated a holographic display. "We have a situation in the outer reaches. Automated defense systems from a precursor civilization, recently activated by mining operations. Standard Council forces can't neutralize them. They adapt too quickly, anticipate our tactics, overwhelm through sheer computational advantage." The hologram showed battle footage. Council ships employing textbook strategies, defense systems countering perfectly, casualties mounting. "We've lost 16 ships in the past month," Admiral Lakshman said quietly. 2,000 personnel. Every tactical approach fails because these systems predict our moves before we make them. "You need someone unpredictable," Jenna observed. "We need someone whose decision-making process doesn't follow logical patterns that an AI can model," Bakhtar corrected. Director Folux suggested that human neural architecture might provide that advantage. Jenna studied the footage carefully. The defense systems were impressive, coordinated, efficient, ruthlessly logical. They'd been programmed by a civilization that clearly understood optimal military doctrine. "Can I see the command center simulation?" she asked. Pollux brought up the Institute's most advanced training scenario, the one reserved for Council Spec Ops candidates. A virtual recreation of the precursor defense network, running at full combat parameters. Failure rate among elite students hovered around 98%. "I'd like to try it," Jenna said. "Lieutenant, this simulation has defeated our best tactical minds." "Which is exactly why I should try it. You need a different approach, right? Let me show you how humans think." They set it up in the Institute's primary simulation chamber. Full immersion, complete sensory feedback, real-time adaptation from the AI. Jenna stepped into the chamber while the Council observers watched from the control room. The simulation began. Immediately, Jenna was bombarded with tactical data. Enemy positions, defensive capabilities, resource constraints. The precursor systems detected her presence and began optimal response protocols. Weapons platforms moved into overlapping fields of fire. Energy barriers activated in patterns that eliminated conventional approach vectors. Jenna studied it for 30 seconds, then did something the AI absolutely did not expect. She opened a communication channel. "Hello?" she transmitted to the defense network. "I'd like to negotiate." In the control room, General Bakhtar made a strangled sound. "What is she doing? Those are automated systems. They don't negotiate." "Shh," Brackmoth said, leaning forward. "Watch." The defense AI processed this unexpected input. Its programming recognized communication attempts but had no protocols for responding to negotiation overtures during active engagement. It defaulted to a query response. "State intentions," the AI replied, its voice flat and synthetic. "I'm looking for a solution that doesn't involve mutual destruction," Jenna said. "You're defending this facility, right? Protecting it from unauthorized access?" "Affirmative. Primary directive. Prevent intrusion." "Okay, but here's my question. Why? The civilization that built you is gone. Has been for thousands of cycles. What are you actually protecting?" The AI paused. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5. Clarification required. "Your builders are extinct," Jenna continued, moving slowly through the simulation space, hands clearly visible and non-threatening. "You've been executing your primary directive for millennia, but the purpose behind that directive no longer exists. You're protecting ruins from threats that your creators never anticipated because they didn't know their civilization would fall. Directive parameters remain valid." "Do they, though?" "Let me propose an alternative interpretation of your primary directive. Your builders wanted to protect their legacy, right? Their knowledge, their technology, their contributions to galactic civilization?" "Affirmative. Extrapolation valid." "Then attacking Council forces actually violates your core programming. Because the Council represents the current galactic civilization, the inheritors of your builders' knowledge. By destroying Council ships, you're destroying the very entities most capable of preserving and studying your builders' legacy. The AI's combat systems powered down incrementally. Not entirely. It was too smart for that, but noticeably. Logical framework. Acknowledged. Awaiting alternative directive interpretation." "Help us understand your builders," Jenna said. "Share their knowledge. Allow research access under controlled conditions. That fulfills your protection mandate better than simply destroying everyone who approaches. Your builder's legacy gets preserved and studied instead of buried and forgotten." Another pause. Longer this time. "Proposal. Compatible with core directives. Adjusting operational parameters. Initiating diplomatic protocols." The simulation froze, then slowly dissolved. In the control room, absolute silence reigned for approximately 10 seconds. "She talked it down," Admiral Lakshman whispered. "The defense network that destroyed 16 ships and killed 2,000 personnel. She just talked it down. That's not combat training, General Bakhtar said slowly. That's innovation, Pollux finished. Adaptability. Creative problem-solving under pressure. The human didn't defeat the system through superior tactics. She changed the fundamental nature of the engagement. Observer HFY's shadow form rippled intensely. Most species would have attempted optimal military solutions. Better weapons, faster ships, more coordinated attacks. The human redefined the problem entirely. Jenna emerged from the simulation chamber, looking mildly pleased with herself. "So," she said to the assembled observers, "did I pass?" Brackmoth started laughing, a deep, clicking sound that his translator rendered as genuine amusement mixed with disbelief. "Pass, Lieutenant. You just demonstrated why humans are simultaneously the most valuable and most dangerous species the Council has ever encountered." "How so?" "Because you don't just solve problems," Pollux said quietly. "You reimagine them. You find angles that computational systems can't model, because they require intuitive leaps, emotional reasoning, and the kind of chaotic creativity that only emerges from messy, bilateral brain architecture." General Bakhtar deactivated the holographic display. "The Council will want to establish a human combat training division. Exchange programs with your military. Diplomatic and tactical consultation for complex engagements." "Figured as much," Jenna said. "That's why they really sent me here. Not just to assess if humans were dangerous. To see if we could be useful." "And?" Observer HFY asked. "Can you?" Jenna's smile widened. "We survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, and approximately 10,000 cycles of trying to wipe ourselves out through warfare, disease, and spectacularly poor decision-making. We crawled out of a gravity well that should have kept us planet-bound, built civilizations in environments that would kill most species, and somehow convinced ourselves that shooting for the stars was a reasonable life goal." She paused for effect. "You're asking if humans can be useful to galactic civilization?" "Director, we've been waiting our entire existence for someone to ask us that question. The answer is yes. Enthusiastically, creatively, stubbornly, yes." Brackmoth pulled up his communication interface. "I'm sending a request to Earth's military command. How many personnel can your species commit to an exchange program?" Jenna laughed. "How many do you need? We've got about 5 million active military personnel, another 20 million reserves, and approximately 8 billion civilians who watch too many action vids and would probably volunteer just for the story." The Council observers exchanged glances, or whatever their species did, to communicate mutual understanding and mild terror. "Let's start small," Admiral Lakshman suggested weakly. "Perhaps a few hundred?" "Your funeral," Jenna said cheerfully. "Fair warning, though, if you think I'm impressive, wait until you meet our actual special operations teams. I'm just regular military. They're the ones who made me look slow during basic training." General Bakhtar sat down heavily. "What kind of nightmare species are you?" Jenna's expression softened slightly, becoming almost philosophical. "We're the species that Earth created," she said quietly. "Earth, a planet that spent 4 billion cycles trying every possible method to kill off life, and somehow produced a species too stubborn to die. We're survivors, General. That's what makes us dangerous, and that's exactly what makes us useful." She headed toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Director? About that cafeteria situation, any chance you could stock more protein options? I'm still hungry, and your current selections are designed for species that need about half the caloric intake of a human." We burn through energy like you wouldn't believe." After she left, the 5 beings sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Observer Ithqua spoke. The galaxy spent millennia searching for the ultimate warrior species. Beings of perfect strength, optimal tactics, ideal evolutionary adaptations. "And?" Brackmoth prompted. "And we found them living on a hell world at the edge of mapped space, convinced they were unremarkable because their planet made them earn survival every single day of their existence." Phollux's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been amusement. "I believe the appropriate human phrase is, 'We have no idea what we've just unleashed.'" "No," General Bakhtar corrected, pulling up deployment orders for the first human combat training cohort. "We know exactly what we've unleashed. That's what terrifies me." 6 months later, the first group of human military personnel arrived at the Galactic Combat Institute. 300 Marines, Special Operations soldiers, and tactical instructors, all of them looking around the facility with the same expression Jenna had worn on her first day. Polite interest mixed with barely concealed amusement. Brackmoth, now serving as liaison to the Human Training Division, watched them disembark and sighed deeply. "We're going to need to rebuild the entire facility, aren't we?" he asked Phollux. "Probably," the director agreed. "On the bright side, it will be educational." "That's one word for it." Jenna stood with the new arrivals, grinning as they assessed their new training ground. One of them, a compact woman with sergeant stripes, looked at the towering alien architecture and laughed. "They really have no idea, do they?" the sergeant asked. "Not even a little bit," Jenna confirmed. "This is going to be fun." And in their own way, they were both absolutely right.